What's going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be showing you how I beat my Pokemon Storm Silver Hardcore Nuzlocke. First, I'm going to go over the rules I used in this run. We of course have the base Nuzlocke rules of you can only catch the first Pokemon you see in an area. If a Pokemon faints, it's considered dead and must be boxed or released, and if you black out, the run is over and you must restart. Now for the Hardcore Nuzlocke rules, which include you can only play on set mode, you can't level past the level cap, no items are to be used in battle, however held items are fine, and finally, just some additional rules that I've added for myself are no EVs and no setups allowed. Regardless, without further ado, it is time to get into the video. We start our journey in Elm's lab, where we pick up our first Pokemon, Lime the Cyndaquil. We then fast forward to Mr. Pokemon's house, where we pick up Apple the EV. We then talk to Professor Oak. Elm tells us he got robbed or some shit, and on our way back, we run into our rival. We beat his ass real quick, get back to the lab, we talk to some police motherfucker, and then we name a rival. Um, we then head on over to Route 29, where Lyra gives us some Pokeballs, and then I catch my first encounter, which is a Zigzagoon that I name Grape. I then head up to Route 46. I find a Spearow that I catch and name Lemon. We reach Cherry Grove once again, and using our old rod, find and catch a Magikarp that I name Blueberry. Afterwards, I go up to Route 30, where I find and catch a Surskit that I name Carrot. We then skip a bunch of trainers, and upon getting to Route 31, we encounter and catch a Wurmple that I name Celery. I then quickly beat some random ass bug catcher and arrive at Violet City. After arriving at Violet City, I evolve Celery twice and then talk to the juggler in the corner and pick up a Bulbasaur that we name Pepper. We then head on over to the mart and pick up some Pokeballs. Afterwards, I head over to the Dark Cave and I encounter and catch a Geodude that I name Tomato. This Geodude would later replace the Eevee, as Eevee until it evolves is kind of useless. I then head on over to Route 32 and encounter and catch a Mareep that I name Cherry. Afterwards, I replace Grape with Cherry and then I head on over to the Bellsprout Tower where I find and catch a Pidgey that I name Mango. Afterwards, I take out a few trainers and I eventually reach the Elder. Before fighting him, however, I get all my mons to 14 and evolve Lime into Quilava, as Quilava could be quite useful for this fight. So, we start the fight, leading Celery, who easily takes out Bellsprout with a couple gusts. Afterwards, the Elder sends out Hoothoot. I then switch into my Mareep. After a couple Thundershocks, the Hoothoot was gone. After that, he sends out a Chingling. I switch back into Celery and one-shot it with Bug Bite. His final Pokemon, Cherubi, is sent out, and I two-shot it with Gust. After beating him, he offers you a bunch of Evo items, and I pick the Childor, as I want Glaceon for the first gym. We then head out of Bellsprout Tower and get a team together. My new team is pretty much the same, except Celery is replaced by Apple, and Carrot is replaced by Grape. I replaced these two because Bug-type kind of sucks ass for this gym. And yeah, but anyways, there isn't really much of a plan here, as Apple pretty much just sweeps Falconer's entire team with Icy Wind. Yeah, so I just went straight into the fight, and unsurprisingly, Apple just one-shot his whole fucking team with Icy Wind. It was over. We just got our first badge, just like fucking that. After beating Falconer, we head back to the Pokemon Center and go to the Pokemart to pick up the Togepi egg. I then swap out Grape for Celery and Lemon for Pepper. Afterwards, we head over to Route 32 and face a couple trainers, which leads to Pepper evolving into Ivysaur. We eventually end up reaching the Pokemon Center and talk to an NPC that gives us the TM for Water Pulse. We then head into Union Cave where we encounter a Sandshrew that I catch and name Pineapple. I then take out a couple trainers and end up at Route 33 where I encounter and catch a Slackoth that I named Grapefruit. And finally, we reach Azalea Town. After reaching Azalea, I head over to Elix Forest where I find a Bidoof that I unfortunately kill with a crit bug bite. I then talk to Kurt and head on over to the Slowpoke Well where I find a Bronzor that I catch and name Watermelon. I then beat a couple trainers until I eventually reach Proton. For the Proton fight, I lead with Tomato who easily takes out Voltorb. He then sends out Cacnea. I switch into Celery predicting the Needle Arm and one-shot the Cacnea with Air Cutter. He then sends out Zubat and I switch into Apple who easily one-shots the Zubat with Icy Wind. He then sends out his final Mon, Coughing, and I send Tomato back in, predicting the Flamethrower. I do about a third of its health with a Rock Throw. I then switch in Lime on a Flamethrower because he has Flash Fire, and he subsequently kills the Coughing with 2 Embers. Afterwards, we head out of Slowpoke Well and get ready for Bugsy. As you may notice, I have a slightly different team for Bugsy, with Pepper being replaced with Lemon, Cherry being replaced with Blueberry, and Celery being replaced with Watermelon. Now that I'm ready, I head into the gym, beat a couple trainers, and begin the fight with Bugsy. Similar to Falconer, there isn't really much of a plan, as Lemon one-shots 4 out of the 6 of them on his team. Everything went exactly as expected, as Lemon one-shot Butterfree, Yama, and Beedrill.
And then he switched into the main threat, his Scyther. I go for one aerial ace, but he swords dances, predicting the wing attack. I switch into watermelon, and then +2 attack, wing attack does about half. I then switch into blueberry, predicting a U-turn, and sure enough, he U-turns and goes into Heracross. I then get a free switch into lemon as Heracross used rain dance. I kill the Heracross next turn with a single aerial ace. He then sends out Pinsir, who I two-shot with aerial ace, and then finally Scyther is sent back out and is easily killed by a couple more aerial aces. And with that, we had claimed our second badge. After beating Bugsy, we head back to the Pokemon Center and replace lemon with cherry and tomato with celery. I then prepare for the rival fight by leading with Apple. I just go right into the battle, and it starts with him sending out a Murkrow that Apple easily one-shots with Icy Wind. He then sends out Croconaw. I then switch into Blueberry to get an Intimidate off. Afterwards, I immediately switch into Cherry, who kills him with two Thunder Shocks. He then sends out Ghastly. I switch into Blueberry and one-shot it with Bite. Afterwards, his final Moncadabra is sent out and also gets one-shot by Bite. I then quickly catch these two stupid Farfetch to get the HM for cut. Afterwards, I head back to Azalea to get the charcoal. I then travel all the way up to the Route 34 gate, where Cynthia gives you the odd keystone. I then head back to Azalea once again and throw the stone down the well and encounter a Spiritomb that I catch and name Papaya. I then head all the way back to Route 34, where I encounter and catch a Drowsy. After that, we finally reach Goldenrod City. Now that we've reached Goldenrod, the first thing I do is head up to Route 35, beat up a couple trainers, and encounter a Nidoran female that I catch and name Banana. I then head up to National Park, where I find and catch a Sunkern that I name Pear. I then head over to Route 36, where I encounter and catch a Growlithe that I name Olive. Finally, I head back to Goldenrod City and talk to the juggler in the corner of the Pokemon Center, and he gives me a Chimchar that I name Pomegranate. Now that I've gotten all my encounters, it's time to begin preparing for Whitney. So I've got my team ready for Whitney. I swapped out lime for tomato, cherry for papaya, and celery for pepper. While there once again isn't a clear plan, a decent amount of Whitney's team is completely walled by papaya, so my main goal is to deal with Lickitung and Miltank. Regardless, after heading into the gym, we take out a couple of the gym trainers and head right into the battle with Whitney. She first sends out Lickitung. I prepared for this and sent out Watermelon as it completely walls it. After hitting it with a couple Hypnosises and one extra Sensory, I switch into Apple, who easily takes it out with a couple of Icy Winds. Apple being out brings out the Lopunny, who has Jump Kick. This gives me a free switch into Papaya, as Lopunny can't hit it. Knowing that she was going to switch out Lopunny, I go for Hypnosis. This ends up hitting her Clefable, who easily goes down after some Dream Eaters and Feint Attacks. She then sends out Wigglytuff, who annoyingly enough goes for Attract, so I choose to just switch into Apple and go for some Sand Attacks. I then switch back into Papaya and kill it after some more Dream Eaters and Feint Attacks. Her major threat, Miltank, is then finally sent out. I try going for Hypnosis, but I miss and get attracted, so I swap into Blueberry for Intimidate. After failing to touch it next turn, I then switch out into Tomato, who with a few Magnitudes managed to get it down to the red. After multiple failed switches, I end up getting Pepper in, who Leech Seeds and takes it out. Finally, her last two Pokemon went down quite easily, as neither of them could hit Spiritomb. And with that, we've gotten ourselves the third badge. Now that I've beat Whitney, I quickly head back to the Pokemon Center and swap out Watermelon for Cherry. I then stop by the flower shop, pick up the squirt bottle, and head over to Route 36 to deal with the Sudowoodo. Now that the Sudowoodo has been dealt with, I head up to Route 37, quickly take out a couple trainers, and arrive at Equitique. Now that I've reached Equitique, I head over to the mart to pick up some Great Balls. I then go back to Route 37, where I encounter an Ardeos that I catch and name Melon. I then head up to Burn Tower, where I encounter and catch a Duskull that I name Kiwi. After that, I quickly level up all my Pokemon to level 27, which leads to Tomato evolving. I then put Apple in front in preparation for the rival battle. The battle starts with him leading with Murkrow, who easily gets one shot by Aurora Beam. He then sends out Elekid, so I swap into Tomato, and one shot it with Magnitude. Croconaw is then sent out, and I switch into Pepper, thinking it was going for a water move. I then switched again to Cherry, who took care of it with a couple Thunder Shocks. He then sends out Haunter, who is easily dealt with after I swap into Blueberry and kill it with Bite. Finally, his last Pokemon, Kadabra, is sent out, so I switch into Papaya and one-shot it with Shadow Sneak. I then quickly go through the story stuff and head back to the Pokemon Center to get my team prepared. I've managed to get a team together. It's pretty much the same, outside of Grape replacing Cherry and Grapefruit replacing Pepper. Regardless, we head into the gym and quickly take out the gym trainers and immediately begin the Morty fight. He leads with Duskull, which has no moves that can hit my lead, Vigoroth. Because of this, he switches out into Shuppet, who gets one shot by Night Slash. He then sends out Haunter, which Grapefruit easily takes out with two Night Slashes. Finally, his Gengar, the biggest threat, is sent out, and luckily, we ended up getting a Night Slash crit and one-shotting it from full. After that, the fight is pretty much over. I swap into Papaya, who easily takes out Mischievous and Duskull. Sableye is then sent out. I swap into Blueberry and easily kill it with a couple Dragon Rages. And with that, we have our fourth badge.
Now that we've beat Morty, I head back to the Pokemon Center and swap out Grape for Pepper. I then head over to Route 38, where I encounter a Doduo that I catch and name Apricot. I finally reach Route 39, where I find a Ponyta that I catch and name Orange. We've now arrived at Olivine City, where I immediately pick up my good rod and find a Chinchou that I name Guava. I then go to the lighthouse and take on a couple trainers and eventually reach Jasmine. We now begin our journey to Cianwood as we head over to Route 40, where I encounter a Tentacool that I catch and name Starfruit. I then beat a couple trainers and eventually reach Cianwood, where I pick up the special event Pikachu that has Surf and Fly. I then evolve Pepper and begin this Ucine fight, which is quite easy as Hypno can't touch Papaya, meaning he always switches out. He then switches out into Rotom, who gets one shot by my Feint Attack. Electrode is then sent out, and after switching into Tomato, I easily take it out with an Earthquake. Jumpluff is then sent out, and I switch into Blueberry, who easily takes it out with Ice Fang. Finally, Hypno is sent back out, and I switch into Papaya, who easily kills it with Shadow Sneak. I then head back to the Pokemon Center and begin preparing for Chuck. My team is now ready for Chuck. I replace Grapefruit with Celery, Pepper with Watermelon, and Apple with Guava. So, I just decide to head right into the fight, and lead with Tomato, as Focus Punch is the only fighting move Primeape has. After a couple Earthquakes, he switches into Breloom. I then switch into Celery, who completely walls Breloom and kill it with Air Cutter. Polyraft is then sent out. I switch into Lantern to get as much damage in as possible, but after a Focus Punch and Hypnosis, I swap into Papaya to take the Focus Punch. I then swap into Watermelon, who easily takes it out with a couple extra sensories. Hitmonchan is sent out. I then switch into Blueberry, who easily kills it with a couple Surfs. Primeape is then finally sent back out. I switch into Tomato, who subsequently kills it with a couple Earthquakes. He then sends out Hitmonlee, and predicting high jump kick, I swap into Papaya. I then swap into Watermelon, who takes it out with extra sensory. Finally, his last Pokemon Hariyama is sent out. I then swap into Celery, who easily takes it out with a couple air cutters, and with that, we have gotten our 5th badge. Now that we beat Chuck, I quickly head back to the Pokemon Center and swap out Celery for Pineapple. I then quickly evolve Pineapple and pick up the secret potion that I give to Ampharos. Upon leaving the lighthouse, we get a call that tells us to go to the Safari Zone. So, we head to the Safari Zone where we beat a couple Team Rocket grunts. We then reach Route 47 where we beat a couple more Team Rocket grunts until we eventually reach Petrol. I start the Petrol fight leading Blueberry, who easily takes out his Raticate with a couple Surfs. He then sends out Weezing, and I, predicting the Thunder, go into Pineapple. I then swap into Guava, who easily takes the Fire Blast, and finally, I send out Watermelon, who gets it low with an extra sensory, but unfortunately, he switches out on the second turn to Skuntank. I then go into Blueberry to get an Intimidate off. I try to Aqua Tail, but I end up missing. I then switch into Tomato, who's going to do some good damage with Earthquake, but unfortunately, an unlucky Flamethrower burn stopped that. I then switch into Pineapple, who unfortunately ends up being our first death as he got hit with a crit Flamethrower. I then send Watermelon back out, who hits it with the Hypnosis. Guava is then sent out, and I easily kill it with a couple Bubble Beams. Weezing is then sent out. I switch into Papaya, who easily takes it out with the Hypnosis Dream Eater combo. And finally, his last Pokemon, Golbat, is sent out and easily taken out by Papaya. Now that we've beat Petrol, I change up my team a little bit by putting Lime on the team and swapping Tomato for Melon. We then head back up to Route 47 where we take out a couple more Rocket Grunts, and we eventually reach Ariana. I begin this fight by leading Papaya, who easily takes out her Arbok with Hypnosis and Dream Eater. Honchkrow is then sent out. I switch into Watermelon and try to, but unfortunately fail to get a Hypnosis off. So I swap into Blueberry and manage to get Ice Fang off, and then finally, Guava is sent out and kills it with a Thunderbolt. She then sends out Vileplume, who is walled and easily taken out by Melon. Her last Pokemon, Jinx, is sent out, and I go into Lime, who one-shots it with a Flame Wheel. Ariana is finally dealt with, and with that, we have finally reached the Safari Zone. Now that we've reached the Safari Zone, I prepare for Archer by replacing Melon with Olive. After that, we just get right into it. I start the fight by leading with Guava so I can take out the Scyther, as the Zangoose seems to always target Riley. With the Scyther down, Mawile is then sent out. The Mawile immediately dies to his Lucario's Aura Sphere, and my Thunderbolt almost kills the Zangoose. Gramble is then sent out. I go for Thunderbolt again, and then I get roared into Papaya. Gramble and Zangoose are then both killed by Ursaring, and Gyarados is finally sent out. I put it to sleep, hit a couple Dream Eaters, and swap back into Guava, who finished it off with Thunderbolt. Archer's last Pokemon, Houndoom, is sent out and ends up dying after a couple Bubble Beams from Guava. I then heal up and go to Road 48, where I find a Farfetch'd that I unfortunately don't catch. I then head up to the Safari Zone, where I encounter a Paris that I catch and name Lemon. After that, I go into Cliff Cave, where I find a Golbat that I catch and name Avocado. Finally, I go to Route 47, where I find a Seal that I catch and name Cabbage. I now head back to Olivine City to prepare for Jasmine. I decided this time around to make no team changes as I didn't really need to. So, I just go right into the fight and lead with Olive as Flamethrower one-shots a Matang. She then sends out Steelix, who also gets one-shot by Flamethrower. Bronzong is then sent out. I go for a couple Flamethrowers and get it quite low, but she went for Rain Dance. So, I decided to switch out into Watermelon, who hits it with the Confuse Ray. She then heals up, so I switch into Gyarados, do a little under half with Aqua Tail, and then swap into Guava, who finishes it off with Surf. Fortress is then sent out, and preparing for an explosion, I switch into Papaya. I then once again switch into Olive, who one-shots it with Flamethrower. Skarmory is then sent out, I switch into Guava, who proceeds to kill it with Thunderbolt. Finally, Magneton is sent out, I hit it with a Surf, but I'm forced to switch, so I send out Lime, who kills it with the Lava Plume, and just like that, we have our 6th badge. Now that I beat Jasmine, I head to the Pokemon Center and swap Olive for Pepper. I then head over to Route 42, go into Mount Mortar, where I encounter a Meditite that I catch and name Artichoke. I then go back to Route 42 where I encounter a Cacnea that I name Peas. After that, I reach Mahogany Town and head up to Route 43 where I encounter and catch a Curlia that I name Asparagus. I then meet a couple trainers and do the Lake of Rage event. After that, I talk to Lance and go back to Mahogany. Before going into the rocket base, I make a team for Petrol and replace Pepper with Tomato and Lime with Artichoke. I then head into the base, beat a few trainers, and eventually reach Petrol. I start the fight leading with Tomato, who easily one-shots the Skuntank with Earthquake. He then sends out Toxicroak, and I switch to Papaya, who easily takes out Toxicroak with Hypnosis and Dream Eater. Weezing is then sent out, and once again, Papaya easily kills it with Dream Eater. He then sends out Raticate, and I swap into Blueberry, who finishes it off with Surf. Finally, his last Pokemon, Crobat, is sent out. I then switch into Watermelon, who easily takes it out with Extra Sensory. Now that Petrol is dealt with, I head back to the Pokemon Center and put a new team together for Ariana that replaces Artichoke with Olive and Guava with Avocado. I then head back into the base and start the fight, which actually ends up being incredibly easy as Watermelon manages to take out their entire team outside of a couple Pokemon. After that, I encounter an Electrode in the Rocket Base that I name Beat. I then quickly clear the other two Electrodes, go back to the Pokemon Center, and begin preparing for Price. I now have my team ready for Price. It's very similar outside of Watermelon being switched out for Guava and Tomato being switched out for Cucumber. A Lucario that I got from the gift egg Riley gives you, a Mahogany that I forgot to pick up earlier. Regardless, after beating a couple trainers in the gym, we start the fight. I decide to lead Cucumber, who's holding a wide lens, who ends up one-shotting 4 out of 6 of Price's Pokemon. I did switch into Guava against the Lapras, however, as it wasn't a guaranteed one-hit KO. Regardless, Guava easily kills Lapras with a couple Thunderbolts. Finally, Frostlass is sent out. I guaranteed live, so I stayed in and almost killed it with Thunderbolt. He then heals, giving me the free switch to Papaya, who gets it back down to half. I then finally switch into Olive, who finishes it off with Flamethrower. And with that, we now have our 7th badge.
Now that we have our 7th badge, I head back to the Pokemon Center and put a team together for Petrol that replaces Guava with Pepper, Olive with Tomato, Avocado with Watermelon, and Blueberry with Artichoke. I then fly to Goldenrod, pick up the Rocket outfit, and go into the tower. I then take out a couple trainers and eventually reach Petrol. I begin the fight leading Cucumber, who easily takes out his Raticate with Aura Sphere. He then sends a Toxicroak, and I, predicting the Cross Chop, switch into Artichoke, who kills it next turn with Psycho Cut. Weezing is then sent out, and I switch into Watermelon, who puts it to sleep and gets it low with Extra Sensory. I then switch into Cucumber, who finishes it off with Iron Tail. He then sends out Tangrowth, and I switch into Pepper, who takes it out with a couple Sludges. His Hypno is then sent out, and after a long stall fest, Watermelon manages to kill it with Extra Sensory. Finally, his Skuntank is sent out and subsequently dealt with by Tomato, who one-shots it with Earthquake, giving us the easy win against Petrol. I then head to the Pokemon Center and once again switch up my team from our rival, replacing Artichoke with Raichu, Pepper with Grapefruit, Cucumber with Guava, Watermelon with Banana, and Tomato with Blueberry. I go right into the fight leading with Raichu, who easily one-shots Honchkrow. He then sends a Feraligatr, who is also one-shot. Magmar is sent out next and is also taken out by a couple Thunderbolts. Electabuzz is then sent out, and I switch into Nidoqueen, who kills it with a couple Earth Powers. He then sends out Alakazam. I then swap into Papaya, who one-shots it with Sucker Punch. Finally, his last Pokemon, Gengar, is sent out, and I decide to swap into Grapefruit. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out, and I'm forced to switch into Guava, who lands one Thunderbolt until I'm forced to switch once again into Papaya, who finishes it off with Sucker Punch. I then quickly clear out the underground area and pick up the key card. After that, I head back to the Pokemon Center and quickly put a team together for Proton that replaces Banana with Watermelon, Raichu with Cucumber, Grapefruit with Olive, and Guava with Tomato. I then head into the Radio Tower, beat a couple trainers, and eventually reach Proton. I just go right into the fight, leading Tomato, who easily one-shots Electrode. He then sends out Cacturn. I switch into Olive, who unfortunately doesn't one-shot it because Electrode set up Rain Dance. Next turn, he switches out of Cacturn into Camerupt. I then switch into Blueberry, who one-shots it with Surf. Weezing is then sent out. I quickly switch into Tomato to take a Thunder. I then switch again into Papaya, who takes it out
out after a couple Dream Eaters. Crobat is sent out next and is also killed after a couple Dream Eaters. Taurus is then sent out. I try to kill it, but I wasn't able to. So I switch into Cucumber, who takes it out with a close combat. His last Pokemon, Cacturn, is then sent back out and easily taken out after I switch to Bronzong, who killed it with Gyro Ball. Now that we beat Proton, I head back to the Pokemon Center and change up my team once again for Ariana, replacing Olive with Lime, Tomato with Guava, and Blueberry with Raichu. I then head into the Radio Tower and start the fight leading Lime, who easily one-shots her Jinx. She then sends out my Lotic. I then switch into Guava, who gets a lucky crit with Thunderbolt, one-shotting my Lotic. After that, her Vileplume is sent out, and I switch back into Lime, who two-shots it with Flamethrower. Her next Pokemon, Arbok, is then sent out. I then switch into Papaya, who easily kills it with a few Dream Eaters. Her Honchkrow is sent out next. I then switch into Guava, who kills it with Thunderbolt. Finally, her last Pokemon, Progly, is sent out, and I quickly swap into Cucumber, who one-shots it with close combat. And just like that, we've beat Ariana. I head back to the Pokemon Center and prepare the team for the Archer and Giovanni fight by replacing Lime with Olive, Raichu with Beet, and Watermelon with Avocado. I then go to the top of the Radio Tower and immediately start the fight with Archer, leading with Cucumber, who one-shots his Zangoose. He then sends out Machamp. I proceed to switch into Papaya, who takes it out after a couple Dream Meters. He then sends out Gyarados. I land Hypnosis on it, and then switch into Beat, who one-shots it with Thunderbolt. Drapion is then sent out. I go for Thunderbolt, do a decent amount, and then switch back and forth between Olive and Blueberry to get Intimidates off. I then switch into Crobat, who easily kills it after a few flies. Houndoom is then sent out, and I swap into Blueberry, who kills it with a couple Surfs. Finally, Scizor is sent out and quickly dealt with after I switch into Olive and one-shot it. Next up is the Giovanni fight. Cucumber one-shot the Persian turn 1 because of inner focus. He then sends out Rhyperior, and I switch into Blueberry, who one-shots it with Surf. Tauros is then brought out. I get a free switch into Cucumber, who then takes it out with close combat. His Nidoking is then brought out. I go into Papaya, who burns it, and then I switch into Olive, who finishes it off. Nidoqueen is then sent out. I switch into Blueberry, who hits it with an Aqua Tail and Surf. He then brings out his last Pokemon, Kangaskhan, who gets one shot after I get Cucumber in and one shot it with close combat. We then get the Silver Wing from the Radio Tower guy, and we have just like that finished the Radio Tower event. Now that I've finished the Radio Tower event, I quickly head back to Mahogany Town and head east to Route 44, where I encounter a Lotad that I catch named Eggplant. I then go east until I eventually reach Ice Path. While in there, I pick up Waterfall, do some puzzles, and encounter a Swinub that I catch named Bukchoy. I then talk to the Kimono Girl at the end of the cave and reach Blackthorn City. Upon getting there, I head south to Route 46, where I encounter a Gligar that I catch named Corn. I then head back to the Pokemon Center and begin preparing for Claire. So I've prepared a team for Claire that replaces Olive with Bok Choy, Cucumber with Guava, Papaya with Starfruit, and Avocado with Watermelon. Regardless, I head straight into the gym, take out a couple trainers, and begin the fight with Claire, leading with Bok Choy, who easily takes out her Dragonair with Ice Shard. She then sends out Gyarados. I switch into Bee, who one-shots it with Thunderbolt. Her second Dragonair is then sent out. I switch back into Bok Choy, who one-shots it with Ice Shard. Kingdra is then brought out, so I proceed to switch into Guava and repeatedly switch Guava and Watermelon back and forth until Guava eventually finishes it off with Thunderbolt. Her Salamis is then sent out. I switch into Starfruit, predicting the Draco Meteor. I then swap back into Guava, baiting another Draco, but he misses. So I Ice Beam, take a Draco, and then switch into Bok Choy, who finishes it off with Ice Shard. Finally, Altaria, her last Pokemon, is sent out and also one-shot by Ice Shard, giving us the win. Afterwards, I quickly hover to Dragon's Den, complete the test thing, and then get the 8th badge. Now that we've got our 8th badge, I quickly leave and re-enter the Dragon's Den to pick up the free Dragonair that I named Cauliflower. After that, I head to the Pokemon Center and prepare my team for the Kimono Girls by replacing Beet with Cucumber, Starfruit with Papaya, and Watermelon with Lime. I then fly to Newbark and stop by Elm's Lab to pick up the Master Ball. I then head over to Ecruteak and start fighting the Kimono Girls. The first fight is quite easy with Cucumber one-shotting Umbreon. For the second fight, I immediately switch into Papaya, who takes out the Espeon with 2 Sucker Punches. The next fight is also quite easy with Cucumber two-shotting her Leafeon. The next fight is against Glaceon, who is also easily one-shot by Cucumber. For the Flareon Kimono Girl, I switch into Lime, who gets it quite low. I then switch into Blueberry, who finishes it off with a quick Surf. Next up is the Jolteon, who I deal with by immediately switching into Bok Choy, who one-shots it with Earthquake. Finally, the last one comes out with Vaporeon, who was easily killed by Lantern after a couple Thunderbolts. Now that the Kimono Girls have been dealt with, I head over to the Whirl Islands, where I quickly do the Lugia event. I then encounter a Spheal that I catch and name Green Beans. After that, I fly over to Cherry Grove, where I prepare my team for the rival fight in Victory Road by replacing Cucumber with Peas and Lime with Beet. I then head over to Route 27, where I encounter a Buizel that I catch and name Squash. I then head into Total Falls, where I encounter an Azumarill that I catch and name Turnip. I then beat a few trainers and eventually reach Victory Road. I quickly go through it and start the fight with my rival, leading Beet, who with Thunderbolt kills his Honchkrow and Feraligatr. He then sends out Electivire, and I switch into Bok Choy, who one-shots his Electivire, and Magmortar with Earthquake. Finally, he sends out Alakazam. I then switch into Papaya, who one-shots it with Sucker Punch. He then sends out his last Pokemon, Gengar, who also gets one shot, giving us the win on the final rival fight. With that, we finally reached the Indigo Plateau. Now that we've arrived at the Indigo Plateau, I get my team prepared by replacing blueberry with cucumber, guava with asparagus, and papaya with avocado. I then head right into the Elite Four, starting the match with Will, leading with Peas, who one-shots his Jinx, Zatsu, and Luditone. He then sends out Slowbro, and I switch into B to two-shots up with Thunderbolt. His Solark is then sent out. I switch back into Peas, who one-shots up with Sucker Punch. He then sends out his last Pokemon, Gardevoir, who was also killed by Sucker Punch. We now move on to Koga. I start the Koga fight by leading Avocado, who one-shots his Venomoth with Fly. He then sends out Weezing, and I switch into Bok Choy, and then immediately switch again to Asparagus, who one-shots it with Psychic. He then sends out Avocado. I then switch into Bede, who kills it with a crit Thunderbolt. His Toxicroak is then sent out, so I decide to switch into Avocado, who two-shots it with Aeolus. Finally, his Muck is then sent out. I immediately switch into Bok Choy, but unfortunately he substitutes, so predicting Focus Punch, I switch back into Avocado. I then switch again to Peas, who takes a Rock Slide. I then sack off Peas in order to break the sub and get a free switch into Bok Choy, who kills it with an Earthquake. His last Pokemon Tentacruel is then sent out and killed with an Earthquake, and with that, we now move on to Bruno. I start this fight leading Asparagus, who easily one-shots his Hitmontop. He then sends a Lucario, so I switch into Cucumber, who one-shots up with an Aura Sphere. His Hitmonlee is then sent out, so I switch into Avocado, who one-shots it with a quick fly. He then sends out his Hariyama, who after some heal spamming from the AI, eventually goes down. He then proceeds to send out a Hitmonchan. I then switch into Beat, and then again switch into Asparagus, who easily kills his Hitmonchan and Machamp, giving us the win. And with that, we now move on to Karen. I start the Karen fight leading Cucumber, who one-shots her Mightyena and Houndoom. She then sends a Honchkrow, so I switch into Beat, who easily kills it with the Thunderbolt. Her Absol is then sent out, leading me to switch back into Cucumber, who one-shots it with Aura Sphere. Her Spiritomb is then sent out, so I switch into Bok Choy, who kills it with a couple Earthquakes. Finally, she sends out her last Pokemon, Umbreon, and was easily taken out after I switched into Cucumber and two-shot it with Aura Sphere. With that, we finally move on to Lance, the last fight in the game. I begin this fight leading with Beat, who easily takes out his Gyarados with a Thunderbolt. His Garchomp is then sent out, so I switch into Cucumber, sacking him off to get the free switch into Bok Choy, who one-shots with Ice Shard. He then sends out Charizard, so I switch into Avocado, who gets a quick U-turn off for some chip damage. Beat is then sent out, and unfortunately, we get a low roll on Thunderbolt, leading to Beat getting one-shot by Flare Blitz. Despite this, however, the recoil ends up killing Charizard, and using the free switch I got into Bok Choy, I beat Lance, as Bok Choy one-shots his two Dragonites and his Aerodactyl with Ice Shard. And so yeah, just like that, we've beaten Storm Silver. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed my first video. There is more on the way soon, and while I am busy, I would like to at least upload twice a month. So if you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.